So I'm gonna go ahead, get started right off the bat. I'm going to get you guys out of here. I'll be speaking for 15 minutes max, tops, and I'm going to be walking around here. It's going to record what it records. It'll hear my audio at least. For those of you guys who are not familiar with my story or where I came from, I was born in communist Romania. I have 3 of my sisters here with me. We came from a very large family. We came from a family of 11 children, and of those 11 children, 9 of us were born in Romania. And when we were looking at everything that's happening right now in our country, the discussions around our dinner tables with our parents are about the Marxist influence that has become so predominant here in our country. And we're able to recognize it because my parents have lived it. My grandfather had the unique experience of having his family home be taken away from him because now everybody owned it. It belonged to everybody. And then within his lifetime to also see communism end, albeit by that time he was already in the United States. And so I know we're looking at what's going on today, and we're thinking, what has happened that all of a sudden, everything that was always good, the Constitution, our founding fathers, freedom, liberty, capitalism, everyone used to think that that's super awesome, and all of a sudden now it's bad. Why is it always all of a sudden bad? Lululemon, for those of you who are not familiar, Lululemon is a very big athleisure brand. They sell yoga pants for up to $130. They had a post last week promoting a workshop to decolonize gender and to resist capitalism. So of course, you know me, I made a post on Facebook about it, pointing out the hypocrisy of a brand who charges $130 for a pair of yoga pants and who still has men and women's clothing available on their website to talk about decolonizing gender and promoting and resisting capitalism. And one of my acquaintances from college posted telling me capitalism is racist. Now, if you're not aware with what's been happening with the Marxist undercurrent, that's a shocker. How could capitalism be racist? What's the connection? In his mind, there's a very, very clear connection, and I want to explain to you guys what is that connection? Why is it that capitalism is now considered racist? So that way we know how to counter what's going on. And the reason we're experiencing this day is because we've been having since the 30s a steady stream of Marxist influence in our education system, in our politics, in our nation, to slowly win the hearts of Americans over to socialism and capitalism. And this has been the result of nearly a century worth of Marxist ideology at work. So what is Marxism? Marxism is an ideology and a framework and a theory that looks into the history of humankind and says the history of humankind is there are a certain group of people who are the dominant class, and they use the state and systems and tools to oppress the working class. All of us, working class, were oppressed by, this big class up here, and they use the state. And so therefore, Marx and Engels, when they were crafting their theory, they believed that eventually the working class will revolt, there'll be a dictatorship of the working class, and then eventually we'll have this beautiful utopia of a classless utopia where everyone shares everything, and then it's all fairies and rainbows and happily ever after. Of course, as my parents found out in Romania, when you try to usher this Marxist utopia, it quickly becomes hell. And in fact, every time, which we know, every time it's been tried, it becomes hell, not utopia. Well, the Marxists had noticed, by the 30s, that the West wasn't really buying this Marxist dream. Because let's think about it. In the US, the working class, they weren't feeling oppressed. They were living a life of wealthy and bounty, and they knew the rules of the system, and they figured we'll play by the rules, and we're going to also increase our stature in life, which is what the story of the United States has been. And so in Frankfurt, at the University of Frankfurt in Germany, there was a group of communists that have now become known as the Frankfurt School of Thought, and their idea was that in order to bring communism to the West, they need to start by cultural revolution. They need to start influencing culture and then eventually make that more palatable to Westerners until eventually, you wake up and you're, oh, well, all my thoughts are Marxist because that's what I've been trained. And this is called cultural Marxism. In the 1930s, most of these people, of these communists, were Jewish at that time. And so in the 1930s, they fled Nazi Germany and then came to the United States and settled in at Columbia University in New York. And since then, they have begun the work of first training the PhDs and the people who are masters, and then the people who are bachelors, and training your teachers who will then teach the school kids, and those school kids become teachers who will teach the next school kids. So generations upon generations of Marxism has been built up, and that is where we are now. And in fact, Alan Bloom, in his book, The Closing of the American Mind, talks about how in the 80s, there has the nation, the group of kids that were already college students in the 80s, how much they had been influenced by it. He didn't realize that's what he was talking about, but if you look at, if any of you have heard of Yuri Bezmenov, he used to work, he was a former propaganda arm for the KGB. And he talked about the Marxists had a 4-step plan to infiltrate the United States specifically. The first step was demoralization, where you break down the morals of the country, where you get them to hate their founding, get them to hate their history, loosen up sexual morality, break down the family structure, demoralize them so much that they can look at the same set of facts and come to 2 different conclusions, even though they're looking at the same set of facts. Alan Bloom, in his book, when he describes the generation of college students in the 80s, described a demoralized generation. The second step then was to destabilize, which is you stretch them thin. You get them involved in debt, not only personal debt, get them to live a debt lifestyle, but also national debt. Increase the national debt, apply pressure, get them involved in as many wars as possible to stretch their defenses thin, so that way all you need is one little lightning bolt, one little spark, and then a crisis will happen. So that's step 3, you create a crisis, and then step 4, in the crisis, people, because they're destabilized, they're demoralized, they're going to ask the government to help. And step 4, the government comes in with a temporary program that then becomes the new normal, and that is called normalization. And then they would repeat the cycle of crisis and normalization over and over again until the United States citizens are accustomed to Marxism. That, Yuri Bezmenov said in the 80s, that the step of demoralization was so thoroughly complete that Americans were demoralizing Americans. That's the 80s, that's 40 years ago. And then, in the 80s, also one thing that came into play was that in the US law schools, they started teaching a new theory called critical race theory. It is based off of Marxist thought, which is the critical theory of oppressed and oppressor, but they took it a step further, where they said that because they believe in the Marxist ideology that there is a dominant group and an oppressed group, therefore in the United States, the dominant group then has created legal systems and institutions to ensure that the dominant group continues remaining dominant, and then that the oppressed groups continue remaining oppressed. And what they did is they just injected race in there too. So they said, okay, well in the US, the hegemony, the dominant group is male, white, Christian, and they love capitalism. Now all of a sudden, if you are white, male, Christian, and if you love capitalism or any of the combination of those, you are now bought into the racist ideologies of the dominant group, because according to critical race theory, your number 1 goal is to maintain the status quo, maintain the dominance of this dominant group. So even if you are a loving person, if you support capitalism, what you're really supporting is racism. And that's how my college-educated friend believes that capitalism is racist. So any conversation will eventually somehow lead to, that's racist, because of critical race theory. Because if you support anything that is considered to be a Western ideal, Western ideals must therefore uphold white supremacy, according to critical race theory. So, now that we know where we are and how all that's connected, how do we fight back? Because that's the most important thing right now, to fight back. Step number 1 is learn to speak up. When the Marxists took over in Romania, the first thing they did was bully people into silence. Because that's what Marxists are, they're bullies. In Romania, you would get fined or jailed or kidnapped and somehow end up either in a labor camp or dead. Here, they call you racist, they call you bigot, they threaten to call your employer. They might get you fired from your job, as some people has happened to some people. But they will try to bully people into silence. In Romania, they were successful. And the people who fought back against Marxism, well, given the first thing Marxists do when they come into power, say, you don't need your guns. This is government by the people, of the people. You know, we all love each other, so don't give your gun. You know, you don't need guns. We'll all protect each other. So the revolutionaries, or the people who were pushing back against Marxism, didn't really had a chance because they had to make their own lead bullets to fight against the army. So the thing is, first step one is be willing to be bold and be willing to speak up. People need to hear you speak up. If you don't speak up, if we don't speak up, what happens is that people around you are watching and they think, oh, well, that person thinks this is right. Maybe I'm crazy for not thinking it's right. And we social condition each other then to accept what is being spoken, even if it's not truth and even if it is crazy. So be willing to speak up. Step number 2, just learn to be emotionally resilient and to not allow the insults to get to you. That's just what we're going to have to do. My mom was spat on by our neighbors. My father was jailed. My sisters endured state-sanctioned bullying in the state schools. You have to just learn to be more resilient. Who cares if someone is going to call you a name? Because what you're fighting for is the freedom not only of the United States, but the United States is the last beacon of freedom in the world. There are people all over the world, if you look on social media, writing letters of encouragement to Americans, say, keep fighting, because what you guys do impacts us. If America is over, if Marxism takes over America, there is no place to escape to. My uncle swam across the Danube River at night while being shot at by his fellow countrymen for the chance to get to a refugee camp where he might be given permission to come to the United States. He ran the risk. There were some who made it to those refugee camps and were sent right back to Romania, where they faced jail, torture, or death. And to this day, we still have people who traverse thousands of miles and risk rape and death to be able to come here. So we need to learn to set our emotions aside and just be willing. Okay, we're going to take the insult. It's okay. I have been blocked. We had different people who were here that I knew personally, who live in the same household as someone who is very, very liberal, very radical, or their own family members are rejecting them or calling them names. How much harder is that for them? And how much easier is it for us, especially if you have family members who share the same political belief system as you, or when you have groups of like-minded people. So we need to be willing to be disliked and to be insulted, because it's just a bullying tactic. The third thing is, when you're having conversations with people, have conversations with them as people, as individuals. Don't assume things about them just because they're coming and making an argument that is a very liberal talking point. Don't assume that they're going to have the viewpoints of all the other liberal talking points. They might, but don't assume it. Because we don't like people to assume what we believe or what we think. If you start making assumptions about them, and if they're talking to you, you start addressing, oh yeah, but liberals believe this. They'll say, well, I never said that. And they're going to shut you down, and you won't be able to have that conversation. And you just never know. When it comes to deep-seated beliefs and things that are very emotional, Beth Haney talked about emotional reactions. When it comes to things that are very emotional, we need to take it kind of one person at a time. For example, 2 years ago, one of my colleagues set up a meeting with me and pulled me aside into his office, and he goes, Silvica, are you a Trump supporter? And I said, do I support the President of the United States of America? Of course I do. And he goes, but why? You're educated. You're not a racist. Why would you support him? And for a course of an hour and a half, I had a conversation specifically on whatever points he brought up and keeping myself just to those points. And after an hour and a half, he looked at me and goes, wow, you're the first educated, non-racist Trump supporter I've ever met. And I told him, there are plenty of us out there, but you just don't give us a chance. know if I changed his mind about how he's going to vote. But I might have changed his mind about how he interacts with the next person. And the topics I brought up to him, because I addressed only the topics that he discussed, then he knew that I am discussing specifically with him, and I'm not painting with the broad strokes. And it's really easy. You know, there's a meme online called the NPC. It's a non-playable character in gaming. It's a character that, like, they say the same words or do the same action in video games. And so people will joke that liberals are NPCs. They're non-playable characters. If you come up with something, they'll say, orange man bad, or, you know, whatever it might be. And so we have to make sure that when we interact with people, they realize that we're interacting with them as an individual, not with them as a representative of everybody else who they might share their viewpoints with. So that's the third one. We speak to them as individuals. And then afterwards, get involved in your, get educated. One of the things that will help you be super bold, that's actually technically was number one, but I got ahead of myself. One thing that will help you be bold and speak up is to get educated. I wasn't always very active or vocal about my political beliefs. I would, say that I'm a Republican, I'd say that, but I wasn't like super active about it. But what happened is one of my sisters introduced me to Thomas Sowell, which, by the way, is a travesty, because I was an economics major at Cal State Fullerton, and I had not heard about Thomas Sowell, and he is one of the most brilliant economists alive today. An absolute travesty. So one of my sisters introduced me to Thomas Sowell. Then I started reading Walter Williams, Larry Elder, got introduced then to Dave Rubin, Candace Owens, and little by little, I started educating myself. Dan Bongino, Ben Shapiro, right? And because I had educated myself, I was able to have conversations with people wherever I went. And I'm able to respond to people quicker because I know what the truth is, I know what the facts are. And so therefore I have boldness in my response. I mean, you guys, the kind of conversations I have sometimes get out of hand. I was on an airplane once for a business trip, and I like bringing a copy of Thomas Sowell's books with me. I really like Economic Facts and Fallacies, because it sounds so sweet and innocent. But in there it talks about racism, gender gap, urban myths, overpopulation, you name it, just a whole bunch of different talking points that could trigger people. So I bring it along with me, and people will always ask me questions about it, and I'm like, hi, what topic do I want to talk today? And so I actually had a conversation with someone who at one time told me he was afraid that the Border Patrol would start shooting all the kids in the detention centers, because eventually the kids in the detention centers will try to run away and they'll shoot them. And I just stopped and I thought, what in the world? And so I asked him to explain the details to me. And because I had already listened to various Border Patrol agents who had talked about certain things, and I knew about what's going on at the border, because also I came to the United States as a political refugee. So, I know a little bit something about the asylum process. Not as a child, I didn't know. Later on I learned, I got educated. So because I had that in the back of my head, I was able to speak boldly and be able to open up his mind to realize, oh wow, we have ports of entry. He did not know that there were ports of entry where people could claim asylum. So, you never know. If you're educated, if you've educated yourself, then you can speak boldly to people. Then get active, get connected, start local action. The school board, your school system, your local level, that is where you want to get involved. Join the PTA. Go ahead, be involved in your school. Vote for candidates who will oppose the Marxist ideology. Support them, help them campaign, put up a yard sign, make calls for them, go door to door, whatever it might be. Write letters of encouragement to the candidates or to Young Kim and Ling Ling Chang. They get lots of hate mail. Why not give them letters of encouragement? Get active wherever you can, whatever you can do. And then I'm going to look for the last page because I know, And lastly, after you get involved, you start doing things, make sure you stay connected with a community of like-minded people. It is, at the beginning of the event, I had joked that we're behind enemy lines. Sometimes it feels like we're behind enemy lines. So that's why it's so important to join groups like the Patniks and Women. Not only to be able to be involved, but also we were created as social creatures. If you isolate us from one another, we die, we wither. We have illnesses, so create a community. Check up on your community. Create bonds. If possible, find someone here that you haven't really hung out with. Exchange numbers and sometime in the next month. go ahead and just chit chat. So that way, when you're feeling down and out, you can talk to someone, you can be like, okay, I'm not crazy, I'm normal, yes. And so create that community. Now I'm encapsulating these action items, only things that we personally can do. There are things that I think the Republican Party can do better. One of the things the Republican Party has really dropped the ball on has been marketing. We are primed right now with everything that's been going on with Blexit, which is the black exit from the Liberal Party, Lexit, the Latino exit from the Liberal Party, the walk away movement, which is just kind of everyone who's walking away from the Liberal Party. There's a groundswell of people who are ready, they're sick and tired of what's going on, and now the Republican Party, if they want to, they could start marketing, start reaching out to those people, because those people are sick and tired of the liberal policies, but they don't know what the Republicans can offer them. And we need to figure out how do you change the marketing instead of saying, well, here are the facts, here are the features of the car. When you're sold something in the stores, they don't sell you on features, they sell you on the benefits. They don't say, oh, for men, I'm sure you're interested in how many horsepower the car has, etc. But when I went to go buy the car, I wanted to know, is this going to have good MPGs? How do I feel in it? How's it going to look? I was looking at the benefits of owning the car, not the actual features. So what we need to start doing, especially the Republican Party, needs to start selling the features. What can we offer? If you're sick and tired of that, what can we offer to you? And then we have social media influencers, Republican, conservative influencers with over 1 million followers. Why not reach out to them? Look at their data. See what are the issues that are, resonating at the groundswell with people, and then be able to learn their social media marketing techniques to apply it to the Republican Party as well. There are so many things that we could be doing at the higher level, but what I want to encourage all of you, once again to recap, get educated, speak up boldly, learn to deal with insults and, emotional resiliency, speak to people one-on-one as individuals, and then get involved at the local, with your local people, and find a local community to be involved with. That's it.